Thank the people of Ballymurphy for their support. Thank Ballymurphy! Up Ballymurphy! I want to thank our whole community in Ballymurphy because in the early days of the troubles they stuck with the families, they helped us right through, and now we've got truth, and now we're going to seek justice.
I'd like to thank everybody in Ballymurphy. I'm not originally from here, but now I'm adopted.
You're adopted?
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ballymurphy. I just want to thank the people from Ballymurphy for all your support and everything you've done for us. Thank you very, very much. I love you all. Thank you. Say something. Eddie, you want to say something?
Say something, Eddie.
That's my big sister, Bernie.
We would like to thank all the Ballymurphy people are the best people out. Thank you very much for showing us your support tonight.
Great.
Get to like you everywhere.
And thank everybody. I can't thank you enough. I mean, but we praying for you every night because at the end of the day, without you even spreading the word for us, we wouldn't be standing here today. It's not like the present 71 where there's told lies on us. But today they told the truth and you will spread it for us. Our loved ones are innocent!
Wow, what a moving video from Belfast Media. Thank you, Martino Mueller, for sharing this with us. You know, it's incredible to see real life spontaneous reaction after 50 years of delay, deny from the British government. Good morning to our friends from around the United States, and good afternoon to our friends in the North Ireland, and the United Kingdom. As of 6 a.m. this morning, Eastern Time, we have friends registered to join us from over 30 states and 4 countries. I'm Danny O'Connell, President of the Ancient Order of Hibernians in America. Today, we are with the Ballymurphy families who, after almost 50 years, finally heard the verdict from the High Court, proving their family members were completely innocent when they were murdered by the British Army paratroopers during the dark days of 1971. We remember and pray for the innocent victims of this horrific massacre. Father Hugh Mullen, 38. Frank Quinn, 19. Noel Phillips, 19. Joseph Murphy, 41. Joan Conley, 44. Daniel Taggart, 44. Eddie Dougherty, 31. Joseph Core, 42. John Laverty, 20. John Mccurd, 49. We will open today's events with United States Senator Bob Menendez via video, and then Representative Chris Smith via a letter presented by his Chief of Staff. Senator Menendez has been a longtime supporter of the peace and justice in Ireland. He is a senior senator from New Jersey and the Senate Foreign Relations Committee chairman. Senator Menendez.
I want to thank the Ancient Order of Hibernians for organizing this event and their steadfast advocacy over the years on behalf of the Ballymurphy families. I have been proud to work alongside the AOH and others over the years to support this quest for justice. There was a measure of justice in the past week with the court judgment that those killed at Ballymurphy were indeed innocent. These facts have been crystal clear to all of us here for decades. While extremely long overdue, I hope that the court's decision will bring some measure of solace to the families. This year, I was proud to lead a resolution in the United States Senate which called for full implementation of the Good Friday Agreement and subsequent agreements. The resolution also renewed a call for action to resolve the injustices of past violence. There is much work ahead, and I am glad that so many of my colleagues in the Senate remain committed to the cause of justice in Northern Ireland. The events of those terrible days in 1971 are still felt by the families and so many others in Northern Ireland. Sources of cases remain unresolved from throughout the Troubles, and the relevant authorities have a responsibility to deliver justice. Justice delayed is indeed justice denied, and we must not rest until all of those unresolved cases are fully addressed. The horror of the Ballymurphy Massacre was felt well beyond August 1971, and it set in motion a cycle of escalation that would continue throughout the Troubles. The families and all the people of Northern Ireland deserve answers. They deserve closure. And I want to thank all those who have dedicated their lives to making sure that happens. Thank you for inviting me to this event, and I look forward to continue working with you to build a peaceful, prosperous, and just Northern Ireland.
Thank you, Senator Menendez, for your powerful comments. Congressman Chris Smith is from the 4th District in New Jersey. As past recipient of the AOH, LAOH, Sean McBride Humanitarian Award, he is a leading voice in Congress on peace and justice in Ireland and has chaired or helped with 17 hearings or markups on Northern Ireland since the 1990s. His Chief of Staff, Mary McDermott Noonan, is with us today to present Congressman Smith's written comments. Mary? Mary, you may be muted.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you for being here today.
Sorry you missed my comments. They were outstanding. No. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, and it is my honor to read Chris's letter to the audience. Dear friends, thank you for this opportunity to offer my congratulations and appreciation to the families of the Ballymurphy victims for their tireless work for justice in the north of Ireland and to clear the names of the innocent victims of the past. To the Ancient Order of Hibernians, my friend, National Vice President Sean Pender, and all the national officers, thank you for hosting this forum. Your advocacy and awareness campaigns have helped inform the American public and policymakers about cases of state-sponsored collusion and cover-up in Northern Ireland's past. There is no expiration date on justice, and thankfully, the Ballymurphy family members, through their hard work, dedication, courage, and love, never gave up in their pursuit of the truth about the events of the 3-day massacre in 1971. A clear and unmistakable declaration of innocence of your loved ones, entirely innocent, by Mrs. Justice Keegan, while long overdue, was warranted and truly deserved. In 2011, family member John Taggart offered compelling testimony at a U.S. Capitol Hill hearing I chaired to underscore the importance of the pursuit of justice in individual and specific cases in the North and their implications for a lasting peace. John's eloquent testimony gave strong voice to all the Ballymurphy family members, especially the 57 children who lost a parent in that horrific massacre. John told the bipartisan U.S. Commission then what Mrs. Justice Keegan said this week. The initial investigations were flawed, no eyewitness accounts were taken, and those who were killed were unarmed and innocent. The Ballymurphy family members have always known what the world now knows about the innocence of the victims. Your tenacity and success will help inspire others to carry on for justice in order to secure a real and lasting peace. Thank you, Congressman Chris Smith, Co-Chairman Tom Lantos, Human Rights Commission, the United States Congress. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary, for sharing those words from Congressman Chris Smith. And it's chilling to hear both Senator Menendez and Congressman Smith speak of this issue. And I think one of the key things Chris Smith just told us was when he mentioned a bipartisan commission. The Ancient Order of Hibernians is a completely nonpartisan organization that's issues-based. What this shows us today, that the U.S. is with the victims of the North Ireland and working together with all our political leaders, we hope to see justice for all. Now we'll move to Freedom for Ireland Chairman Martin Galvin, who will interview the victim family members, John Taggart, Breege Boyle, Carmel Quinn, and the solicitor of the Ballymurphy campaign, Patrick O'Mary. Martin?
Thank you, Danny. Karja, I just have to begin. Not only in Ballymurphy, the sort of support that we saw, but for victims throughout Ireland who've been victims of British troops, victims of collusion murder. I can tell you, the way that you fought this campaign, marched into court every day, wouldn't accept anything but the justice that you finally got after 50 years, that has been an inspiration. It's something we hear all the time about the spirit of Ballymurphy and the example of Ballymurphy. And I just couldn't help but beginning without congratulating you on their behalf as well and mentioning that. All right, we're going to lead off with John Taggart, just as he's been leading the campaign since its inception in 1998. John, I want to begin with just to describe, Danny O'Connell went through the list of victims, and to show how bad this case was, the British justifying each and every one of these murders for so long. I just want to go through with you a little bit about the facts of each case. First two people killed were Father Hugh Mullen and Francis Quinn. I couldn't help, if you think about it, there's a very iconic photograph, and it's now a mural, of Bishop Edward Daly holding a handkerchief in front of a wounded person who's being carried to get medical treatment. Could you describe what happened, how Father Mullen, how Francis Quinn were killed, and how the British government for so long said they were guilty? He's overcome with emotion. He just left. What can I say?
John, we seem to have lost your video and your audio.
I didn't. I'm still here, Martin.
Right. We can't see you,
Can you
but
hear me?
yes. Your video is off.
I think you'll need to repeat the question, Martin. He may not have heard you.
All right, Sean, I just want to begin. Danny O'Connell read the list of people who were killed. I want to begin just to explain, for you to explain the circumstances of how Father Hugh Mullen and Francis Quinn were shot down by the British troopers, paratroop regiment. And what justification or excuse the British used for so long to say that their killing was justified?
Would you like me to start?
Yes, let's move,
look, we'll go to Breach Foyle. We're going to go to Breach. You were going to go to the second one. Breach, your mother, Joan Conley, was killed along with John Taggart's father, Daniel, with Noel Phillips, and with Joseph Murphy. Could you just explain circumstances? Your mother was labeled a gun woman. The other people were labeled gunmen and gunwomen. What were the circumstances in which they were killed, and how did the British justify it?
Well, I was only a wee girl at 14, and my sister and myself had gone up to watch the rain. My mummy appeared and told us we had to go home, but the army had fired CS gas, and I lost my mummy. So me and my friend run up in the Springfield Park. We got a bit afraid and came back down. That was all we knew. And our father just told us that she was in a place of safety, but Mr. Taggart, Mr. Murphy was shot, and that she wanted to go home to her children. And they fired at her, and the first shot blinded her. So for 20 odd years, we lived with that, thinking that's what happened. But when we started our campaign to find out exactly what happened, when we got the autopsy reports, I think I was physically sick when I looked at my mummy's autopsy report. My mummy's first shot was in the face, which took half her face off. Me personally think that's a very personal thing, because this was broad daylight. My mummy is now been declared an innocent woman, which I already knew. So to me, that soldier could see her. She was only about 50 yards away from him. It was a bright summer's night. But what had happened is they come out shooting, and everybody sort of run for cover, apparently, which we found out later when we approached people and asked, did they remember what happened? And we were able to piece it together. And basically, my mummy was in a place of safety, and Noel Phillips was shot in the hip as he ran down through the field trying to make it into Ballymurphy. And my mummy was heard saying, don't be crying, son, I'll come and help you. And we don't even know if she made it to him. But the first shot, she was heard to scream that she was blinded, she couldn't see. We believe she'd got disorientated and moved over to the side of the wall. Noel Phillips, as far as we were concerned, was only shot in the hip. Mr. Taggart was actually, he got up and tried to make it into Ballymurphy as well. And the first shot brought him down. And when we got his autopsy report, he was shot 14 times. There wasn't a bullet left in him. My mummy ended up shot 4 times. We believe 4 or more.
Breach, one of the things that was deeply moving about the findings was the coroner said that it showed basic inhumanity to how your mother and some of the other were treated. What was she referring to, just in terms of medical treatment?
Well, what she was referring to was they said they come in, and this was 20 minutes after the shooting, they came in to lift the wounded out. So, and they left my mummy there. They didn't check that she was dead. They said they just looked over and they said, she must be dead. And the soldier who said that was in court and said that. And Mr. Taggart and Mr. Murphy, who was only shot in the leg, and Noel Phillips was taken into the barracks. But in the autopsy reports, that's when we found out how many times they were shot. Danny Taggart was shot 14 times. Noel Phillips, we believe, was executed because he only had a shot in the thigh, but he basically was shot behind each ear. Now, we had witnesses who actually went in, who were in Henry Taggart, who survived, and they said the horrific treatment that was given to our loved ones that went in. They danced on them. They jumped off the top of bunk beds onto their bodies. There was a man called Jared Russell. He was a seaman. He was home and leave. He wasn't shot when they took him out of the field, but they pulled him out in the middle of the road and they shot him 4 times. But he survived. He just died there through the inquest. But he had long hair. And he says they were pulling him that far back, they nearly broke his back. Where my mommy was.
Sorry, and Breach, one of the things the coroner also said was that if your mother had been given medical treatment in a timely fashion, she would have survived the wounds. Is that right?
Because we gave the autopsy report to a Dr. Rock 5 years ago through our legal team, and he came back with a statement saying, though my mommy was shot 4 times in the head, the hand, the eye, none of them were life-threatening. She is basically dead to death. So he reckoned that if she was shot between 8:30 and 9, she didn't die till at least 11 o'clock that night. And we'd witnessed who said they could hear her crying in the field for help. And the lady in the house where she was lying beside, she banged the window and said, come round this side and I'll let you in. And she says, I can't move because I can't see. And when mommy turned her head round, she said, the lady said, half mommy's face was gone. But the thing of it is, Mark, not only did they do that to leave my mommy, now she seen my mommy being put in the back of the sarsen, and they lifted her by her hands and her feet and flung her in and were making fun of her. But then a soldier got up and said he's seen another soldier carrying her being brought in. And we asked why, what was she brought in on? And he said, well, there was no more stretchers left. So she was carried in over somebody's back, because they asked, did they see his face and her face? And he said no. So to me, somebody must have had a lifter and put her on his back, like a piggyback. And then to me, they run around Henry Taggart, and basically it was like a prize kill to them. Look at, we have done this great army.
All right. And they also said that there were weapons being moved through the field where your mother was killed, that there were shots being fired, but there were no guns found anywhere, no sign of anything. And this was just accepted, and not only accepted, but word went out to that effect. And you and some of the other family members got hate mail, abuse, had to leave houses because your family members were accused of being in the IRA and being involved in attacking British troops.
We lived with the stigma of that for 50 years. We knew they were innocent, but the world didn't know. So this has given us justification. But the thing is, I would like to know is, my mummy is now declared a completely innocent woman, murdered in broad daylight. But why? Why was she shot? Who's going to tell me why my mummy's life was taken from us for 50 years? My youngest sister, who was only 2 at the time, had to live that 50 years without knowing what a mother's love was. Because at the end of the day, it's all right them saying she was innocent. But why then did they shoot all our loved ones? Every one of our loved ones were out trying to help someone else.
Okay.
And
we're going to go back to John. John, are you with us? John Taggart?
I am indeed, Martin.
Right. John, we've already...
I'm here.
We wanted to start with... Yep. Yes, we wanted to start just in chronological order. And it mentioned one of the iconic photographs, wall murals of the entire conflict is future Bishop Daly, then Father Daly, holding a white handkerchief in front of a wounded man, I believe it was Jackie Duddy, being carried by other individuals to get help. And just read that, and it was reminiscent of what happened to Father Hugh Mullen and to Francis Quinn. Could you explain the circumstances under which they were killed and how the British government said that it was completely justified? John?
Yep. Martin, thanks for the invite to come on. You do see the iconic figure of Father Daly, but it's also the iconic figure of Father Hugh Mullen. And Father Hugh Mullen had done the same thing in Ballymurphy. He risked his life when the powers were still shooting. Himself and Frank Quinn went in the field to aid Bobby Clark. And that iconic stance where you see with the hanky in the air of his left arm raised, they shot him underneath the arm, just where his arm was raised, as he was going back to the house to phone an ambulance. Frank Quinn was with him also and helping Bobby Clark. Frank Quinn was shot in the back of the head. The powers were in a high-rise flats above, but Daddy was just in that area as well. And the first shots.
All right, and this was in daylight. They could be seen.
Run
You had a
down
priest
towards the
holding
barrack.
up a handkerchief and was shot twice, I believe.
Yeah, everybody could see it, but the difference between Ballymurphy and Bloody Sunday, the eyes of the world were there on Bloody Sunday, with all the cameras and everything else, whereas and Ballymurphy it was none. That there would have continued over 3 days. And if you look at and the third day were 600 paratroopers, including Captain Jackson. He's now General Jackson, and he led 600 paratroopers. The same ones who went into Bloody Sunday, less than 6 months later. He led them in, and then he tainted our loved ones' names by saying that they were gunmen and gunwomen.
Sean, what did they say about Father? How did they justify?
Like I said, that continued.
John, how did they justify the killing of Father Mullen and Francis Quinn? The British actually afterwards said that Father Mullen was a respected parish priest. They sent a letter to the bishop, but that didn't cause them to think that he should get justice, or they should identify the killer or give the circumstances of the killing. How did they justify the killing of Father Mullen and Francis Quinn?
Well, if you look at some of the soldiers who when we say this, the soldiers, we were talking about the Seyfert soldiers, the statements that was taken on the day are crafted on the day by the SIB. If you look at some of the it says, say you see a Soldier T in particular, where he had said he didn't see any person in clerical dress. But all he's seen was the IRA medics. The IRA medics he's talking about is Knights of Malta. They wore big white coats with a red cross on them and Red Cross medal hat. That was his target on the day also, the medics. So, and then we're talking about Bobby Clark, they shot him. And then they seen another figure going across to lift a rifle. This is what they were describing of those who were shot in the field. They were saying they're gunmen and they were running to get the arm. There was no clear up. There was nothing. There was no bullets. There was no soldiers injured. It was just the same theme the whole way through 3 days. And then they tainted our loved ones' names by saying they were gunmen and gunwomen. And
John,
that continued over 3 days.
Breach Royal has described how your father was killed, Danny Taggart, along with her mother and 2 other individuals. There's just one thing. The coroner made a special mention that there was a report filed by the British that your father had 38 bullets in his pocket and that nobody ever saw these bullets. Nobody knows where they came from. And she just rejected that. How did 38 bullets, or at least a record of 38 bullets in your father's pocket to justify his being killed, how did that get there?
That got there by the SIB with crafted statements as if these statements were coming from soldiers. It was the start of the cover up. You have 4 people murdered across the field, across the road from the barrack. That was their cover up, and they would say it about my daddy. But here's the thing: the medic who was there on the day, and he waved his anonymity. It was Nigel Mumford. And he went into gruesome details of I heard my daddy, the wounds that he had put bandages on and all these different things on my dad's back and all this here. So it was really hard sitting to listen. But the one thing about the medic, what he had says when he was cross-examined by the MOD, he says there was no bullets in Danny Taggart's pocket. I'm the only one that took his charges off. Even if it did, if there was, I took his charges off. The water below the floor. That didn't happen. That's a lie. So it was done. He also gave evidence that a captain in the parachute regiment, he asked the medic, Nigel Mofford, to plant bullets on the bodies, and the medic refused to do it. So that's what was happening, but it was cleared up in court, and my dad is an innocent man, is entirely innocent, as the Justice Keegan says.
All right, the next person was Edward Dougherty. Could you describe the circumstances under actually, someone actually came into court and admitted that he had fired the shots which killed Edward Dougherty. That was the only British witness, I believe, who actually admitted firing a shot which killed someone. What was the excuse that they gave for the killing of Edward Dougherty, and what was the actual finding that the judge made about it?
Well, that military witness was them three. There's also video evidence that he made maybe a year or so after, admitting. Again, he says that he was a patrol bomber, and that's why he fired shots. He says he fired one carefully aimed shot. Now that was the statement with the SIB, and then with our legal team, Patrick Murray, he had found the original statements, which was he actually emptied the magazine, and that was brought out in court also. Eddie Dougherty, I spoke to the guy who was with Eddie Dougherty. The two of them were having a conversation. It was Billy Whelan, and the two of them were having a conversation. But Billy told me that Eddie was standing with his back to the barricade, and we're having a conversation about where the directions he should go to get home to see his children. And Billy had says that the soldier fired the bullets. Eddie just dropped. He was shot in the back. He had says that if he had a wee step to the right, the bullet would have been through him also. So it's first-hand witnesses exactly what happened. And there was also a young boy who lived in the house on 51 Whiterock Road, where Eddie was shot, and he witnesses from his front window as well.
All right.
So again, the lies that he was a patrol bomber, when our eyewitnesses just, yeah.
Yeah, John, the next person is John Mccurd. Now, John Mccurd was actually somebody, he worked at a caretaker at Corpus Christi Church. There had been a funeral for a young boy who had been drowned in the area. And he was actually somebody, I believe he had lost a hand fighting in the British Army in the Second World War. What was the excuse or the justification that the British gave for the killing of John Mccurd? What actually happened?
Well, this time there wasn't an excuse at all. They actually didn't claim shooting John Mccurd. They were in the area. We have fantastic witnesses, Maureen Heath and Sheila McAleskey, different people like that there who explained exactly what happened. That they had seen a black soldier. He was down on one knee, and he shot John Mccurd on the back of the head. John Mccurd was an ex-serviceman. He was a joiner. He was still able to work. I've actually spoke to people who worked with him in the building sites, and he was a real character. He was a good, loving father to all his children, and a good, hard-working man. He had just left the church a young lad, Martin O'Hara, just 17, had drowned in a local swimming pool, and he had just left the church to allow for the thing. He worked in the church. He was a builder, like I say, a joiner, and just for the service to go ahead, he took a wee break and walked outside. He only got 15 yards, and he shot in the back of the head by the paratroopers again.
And the last person, there's an 11th victim. There was actually only 10, there were 10 shot dead, and those were the subject of the inquest. But I know there's another individual, the 11th victim, Patty Murphy, that you've always, sorry? There's another individual that you've considered part of the campaign who died as a result of his treatment by British forces. Could you tell us about that? John, can you hear me? John, I asked you to tell us about Patty Murphy.
Patty McCarthy.
Patty McCarthy, I'm sorry. Patty McCarthy.
That was Paddy McCarthy?
Yes, sorry. Thank you, Bridge. I
Paddy
apologize.
McCarthy?
Yeah. Why is he considered part of the campaign that you have?
Do you want me to explain it?
Yeah, thanks, Bridge.
Pat McCarthy was an ex-soldier who left the army, but decided to come to the north of Ireland to make a new life for himself. And he set up in the community centre, a club for kids. And on the morning of interment, he was actually in the community centre, and bread and milk had been brought in, and he wanted to come out and give it to the people. And he actually came out with a white cloth on a stick, and he was waving it, and they actually fired at his direction. So he went back in again. Then he came back out a couple of hours later and he went into Ballymurphy, and he was accosted by the parachute regiment, who proceeded then to torture him. They sort of were calling him names and really giving him a hard time. Then they done a mock execution on him, and they also shot over the top of his head, which in turn, Paddy took a massive heart attack. And when the neighbours come out to try and help him, at that time there wasn't many phones in the area, so they said they wanted to try and get to the phone. The army wouldn't let them, and then when eventually the ambulance came, and Pat McCarthy had died, but because he was apparently had a bit of a heart problem, he was just declared as he died from a heart attack. But nobody realised until we investigated that he was getting tortured, and that's what brought on the heart attack.
Okay, thank you, Bridge. We're going to go to Carmel Quinn. Carmel, your brother, John Laverty, was killed along with Joseph Corr. Could you tell us the circumstances under which it was said that they were both armed, firing shots at the British? What was the actual facts that the coroner's court verdict showed?
The actual facts the Judge Kagan came back with was that both my brother John and Mr. Corr were both innocent, that they were not carrying guns, and the soldier statements were more or less lies. You know, it was just lies. Our John was shot on the 11th of August, 1971, but on the 10th we were evacuated from our area. We were basically refugees because up until that point, 7 people had been murdered. The area, the army were proposing another curfew. That's why Pat McCarthy was delivering milk and bread to families, because families couldn't get out. People with young babies, the whole area was shut down. It was under curfew. But on the 10th, the curfew was lifted. So the people decided to evacuate the women and children. My mummy wouldn't leave her sons. So my elder sister took me and my other sister. I was 8 and she was 14. To be evacuated down to the south of Ireland. Our John brought us over. He carried me because I didn't want to leave my mummy. I had started to cry, and he told me everything would be okay. You know, when I come back, everything would be back to normal. That was the last time I saw him. On the 11th of August, in the early hours, the bin lids started rattling. There was no phones in the area. That's why I want to make it. That's why people rattled the bin lids, because nobody had a phone. They let us know that there was going to be another, you know, they were going to come back in again and do another swoop. My brother John and my other brother Terry, who was 18, went out to see what was happening. And that was the last my mum ever saw her son John and our Terry. They went missing. Well, Terry was arrested. They went missing for 2 days. Nobody knew what had happened. But our John was with Mr. Corr. They didn't know each other, but they were found together. John was shot in the back. Mr. Corr was shot in the back. John was also shot in the thigh. He bled to death on the street. It's just the fact that, you know, the army's cover-up started within moments of our John and Mr. Corr being shot. You know, for somebody to be firing at them with a submachine gun and a pistol, but both were shot in the back, there was no guns found. It was the army that took the bodies away. So, you know, if there was guns there, they had retrieved them.
All right, so they claim that your brother and the other man were armed. They were firing shots. They were killed on the spot, shot in the back. no weapons found, no bullets found, nothing to justify that, and they were able to get away with it. Now, one of the individuals that I know you were very concerned about was an individual named Mike Jackson, who's very familiar to people from the Bloody Sunday families and was involved very much at the paratroop regiment at Ballymurphy. What was his role, and how did he talk about your brother's killing during the inquest?
Well, Mr. Core was still alive. Mr. Core survived for a few weeks afterwards. So he was still alive. Our John was lying wounded, dying on the street, and Michael Jackson decided to give a press conference to say that his soldiers had been in a gun battle with up to 20 armed men, and they had shot them. You know, this was when my brother was lying, Mr. Core was lying wounded. They were both taken to Musgrave Park Military Hospital, not to the nearest hospital. So the cover-up started straight away, and them lies went on for 50 years. And Mike Jackson was on the ground. He gave the orders. You know, this was on the third day.
And he became a general of the British Army, is that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, he did. He did.
All right. And in fact, the commander that day, Sir Derek Wilford, he was the commander on Bloody Sunday, although he says now he doesn't remember anything about civilian casualties or anything of that nature. And he was in fact knighted for Bloody Sunday. All right. Boris Johnson, David Cameron, when the Bloody Sunday verdict came down, David Cameron notified the families he would make an apology. He stood up at Westminster and he said the killings were unjustified and unjustifiable, and the apology was acknowledged. You've had an apology this past week, and it was delivered in a very different fashion. Did you get notice that there would be an apology, and what is the reaction of you and the other families to Boris Johnson's apology?
I actually heard about the apology on Twitter. You know, I wouldn't even give that the name of an apology. That wasn't an apology. When David Cameron stood up and did what he did, that was a head of state. That was a prime minister speaking. But David Cameron also said that it was a few rogue soldiers, and for that he's deeply sorry. You know, he said you can't explain Ballymurphy with a few rogue soldiers. It was a 3-day sustained attack. On day one, after the first casualties, civilian casualties, they should have been told, this is it, that's it, there's innocent people you're shooting innocent people. But when they sent 600 trained parachute soldiers into Ballymurphy, they sent them in the early hours of the 11th morning. They came in to shock and stun the community. So how I feel about Boris Johnson's apology is there cannot be an apology until he knows what he's apologising for. David Cameron apologised after the Bloody Sunday inquiry, after all the details was there, after it had been totally investigated. You know, this so-called witch hunt and re-investigations, we didn't have an investigation at the time. We have never had an investigation into my brother's murder or my neighbour's murders. So what we want, Boris Johnson, we didn't ask him for an apology. We don't want an apology. We want accountability, and we want an investigation for everybody. That's what we deserve. You know, if somebody's murdered, there's an investigation. The RMP, the Royal Military Police, investigated it, you know, at the time. And it was one sheet of paper. The soldier that actually fired the shot that murdered my brother, it was one sheet of paper. And he was told just to sign it. That was it. So it was covered up from day one.
All right. We're going to now go to the solicitor, or one of the solicitors and barristers who fought this case, put the British government in the dock, put British troopers who wouldn't give their names, that they had to hide behind curtains. They couldn't face the families or identify themselves. We're going to go to Padraig O'Murray. Padraig, what sort of investigation was there? You hear about, Carmen was just mentioned about the British say they need new laws because these cases have been investigated and reinvestigated and troublesome investigations. What sort of investigation could justify killings of a priest or the other individuals that a grandmother, the other individuals that we've heard about who were killed in broad daylight with so many witnesses? What did the British do to investigate that, and what did it consist of?
Well, it consisted of little or nothing. The Royal Military Police were tasked with interviewing soldiers. That arrangement was unlawful in itself, and any democracy, that task would be carried out by the police. So we had an arrangement that existed up until I think around 1974, and that arrangement eventually changed. But during the course of the Ballymurphy killings, the military weren't held accountable. They acted with impunity. They weren't subject to the rigors of the law, the normal rules of the criminal justice system, and they got away with it for 50 years, and they covered it up. So the families, I mean, civilian witnesses were not contacted, statements weren't taken. The original inquest, which happened in 1972, was deeply flawed. It was a sham legal proceedings. And, there were very few witness statements. Soldiers weren't compelled to come and give evidence. Their statements were simply provided to the coroner. They weren't challenged. Families weren't legally represented. So all of those rules that you would expect in any democracy didn't exist. The rule of law was non-existent. So it has taken a long time. Obviously, I think you said earlier on, the families knew they're innocent from day one, but it took 50 years for legal vindication. That's a great shame on the British establishment that it took that long.
One of the things that was in the apology, or so-called apology, that was sent in a letter, was that they were sorry for these events and that it took so long. Why did it? I mean, families started to come together in 1998 after the Good Friday Agreement was signed. There was a promise of justice for victims. Why did it take so long from that point on to get to an inquest verdict in 2021?
Well, I think we had inquests in 1972. The families between 1972 and around 1998, when the families got together, people in the north of Ireland didn't have any confidence in those justice systems. In fact, it wasn't a route that they could take. Things started to change after the Good Friday Agreement, and I suppose a game changer was the European Convention on Human Rights was incorporated into domestic law under the Human Rights Act in '98 as well. So you had these legal changes. Irish cases were being brought before the European Court, and the jurisprudence of that court allowed us to start, as lawyers, to start looking at these cases in a very different way. So the state's obligations to investigate was passed to the inquest and the coroner's court, which wasn't really designed to do these type of cases, but that's how it evolved through the jurisprudence of the European Court of Human Rights. I came on board about 13 years ago, and the family's campaign at that point was for a public inquiry. And in my opinion, I didn't think that was achievable. It was at the whim of a British Secretary of State. And I just didn't see that happening. I advised them that a new Attorney General, a local Attorney General, had been appointed in the north of Ireland. And it was no longer, any application would no longer be decided by the British Attorney General, and that we might have a chance. So the families had gathered some statements. We took further statements, had witness surgeries, and then we put together an application. And thankfully, in 2011, the local Attorney General granted new inquest into 10 of those deaths. And it was another 10 years, unfortunately, before we had the inquest conclusion. And in between times, ironically, I know we had the message from Arlene Foster just a few days ago. We had to bring her to court to get funding for the Lord Chief Justice to implement his plan around legacy inquests as well in the meantime. So there were many ups and downs, many legal challenges, many obstacles, as you can imagine, before we got to this point.
All right, now you work on a number of victims' cases, and the British chose this particular day, just 25 minutes after the judge started to give her the inquest findings, dragged out their Queen and the House of Lords to say that in the coming session of Westminster, they want to have an amnesty for the troopers, and they also want to do something to void the Stormont House Agreement. And particularly, it seems like they don't want to give investigations. And I know that you represent many families. They hope for justice. They hope for truth. They hope for a verdict or a moment like the Ballymurphy families had last week. And the way that they hope to get it is through some kind of historical investigation into murders, either by Crown forces or collusion murders. What was the impact of that announcement by the British government, and what are you concerned about with if that legislation goes forward as they now suggest it will?
Yeah, I mean, the timing of the announcement, as you've indicated, was deeply, deeply insensitive, but it's entirely consistent with how the British government had treated these families for 50 years with contempt. So it wasn't a shot to them. That doesn't make it any less disgraceful. And the plans to derogate from the Stormont House Agreement, which was a political agreement, that was a political compromise, not the perfect solution, but certainly a much better plan than what the British government would like to implement now. It does include an investigative arm with powers to compel documents and statements. And my concern in some kind of information recovery process is that those powers won't exist, and families won't get truth. And those other cases that you refer to, that cover-up will continue in that process. I think that's the plan of the British government. It's quite clear from the leaks we've seen in the last number of weeks. It's quite clear in the policy intent of this Tory government over the last number of years. So that seems to be the direction of traffic, and that will be something which will be greeted with great frustration by a lot of these families.
But they seem to say that if there was an amnesty or no one was going to be prosecuted, then all of a sudden the British troopers who shot Father Mullen, or the British troopers who've involved, or people involved with collusion murders or any kind of killing, are suddenly going to come forward and be truthful and give evidence. And that's simply not good. No one can see that happening.
No, I mean, soldiers that don't even have any respect for the legal process, who ducked and dived the inquest. In fact, we had a lot of evidence from the former soldiers' social media accounts where they were encouraging each other to deny and delay the inquest. And I think the third D was dementia. You know, they forget, tell them that you'd forgot what had happened or you have no memory of it. So that's how they treat a legal process with, legal rules. How will they then treat a process where there are no obligations and no sanction or punishment for not cooperating with that? I think we can only imagine that process will not have the respect, and you won't have people coming forward to support that, and that's a great concern for people. And again, then if we don't have the documentation, the disclosure to challenge that narrative, because even if they do come forward, it may be a false narrative, it may be a repetition of the lies they've told already, and without the opportunity to examine that, to cross-examine it, and to challenge it against forensic evidence, to put them in the stand. I mean, that is a process for me that has no value for these families.
Okay. Final question. What's the next step for the Ballymurphy families?
Well, there's a few things. We had already initiated civil proceedings against the Ministry of Defence. Now, those proceedings were on ice until the conclusion of this inquest, and now that we have the very critical commentary by the coroner, we will be proceeding with that with great vigor in the coming weeks. In fact, I received an email only yesterday from the judge who's presiding over those civil elections that he wants to list this matter on June the 11th and wants to progress the cases. So he is obviously cited on these findings, and it appears at this stage he's quite keen to engage us all in court and perhaps give the Ministry of Defence a reality check in terms of where those civil elections are at in light of the commentary by Justice Keegan. We are also obviously considering and looking closely at the developments around the proposal for an amnesty. There is a criminal justice element to this. We've talked about M3, who's admitted shooting Mr. Dougherty, and there's some criticism from the coroner in relation to his use of force, and that's something that we will be looking at and going through the other evidence within the very detailed findings to ascertain if there are other opportunities to progress those matters through the criminal justice process.
All right. Just my last introduction is going to be to, we have a representative of the Irish government who is here to talk about their position. I know Micheál Martin met with Boris Johnson yesterday. They are a party to the Stormont House Agreement and would have something to say about any type of proposal to have amnesty. We welcome Kieran Madden to represent the position of the Irish government.
Thank you, Martin, and thank you.
Sorry, I should have said he's New York Counsel General.
Thank you, Martin, and thanks to the AOH for including me on this platform. I mean, it's worth saying that the AOH have been constant in your support for the Ballymurphy families and in ensuring that they do have a platform here in the United States. I suppose what I have to say is really a reiteration of what the Taoiseach, Micheál Martin, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Sam Mccarthy, have said during the week. The families are familiar with it, but thanks, as I say, for the opportunity to restate it for a US audience. the headline findings of the coroner's report that all 10 of those killed in August 1971 were entirely innocent is a complete vindication of the tireless campaigning by the families over the last couple of decades on behalf of their loved ones. Before we went live, the president of the AOH, Danny O'Connell, spoke about how moving the video, the Belfast Media Group video that we saw at the start was and is, and he's right. And then that was hammered home eloquently by Bríd Foyle when she was speaking in detail about her family's experience. As Bríd said earlier, said while the coroner found that all 10 were innocent, they knew it for 50 years. I suppose the advantage is now that the world knows that all 10 were innocent. And there has to be recognition of the terrible hurt that has been caused to the families. No apology can take away the hurt, but it is important to see a proper response to the findings that the 10 innocent people were killed. Every family bereaved in the conflict must have access to effective investigation and to a process of justice, regardless of the perpetrator. And all victims' families deserve support in securing all the information possible about what happened to their loved ones. We know that legacy in Northern Ireland is difficult, and that's why the two governments and all the parties hammered out an agreement in the Stormont House Agreement in 2014 to chart a way forward on addressing these issues. We have been clear as the Irish government that is the way forward, and the government has strongly advised and continues to strongly advise against any unilateral action on these issues. I don't have a readout from what discussions in Chequers last night between the Taoiseach and the British Prime Minister, apart from what we saw in the media. But I know the issue was discussed there. I'll make two brief other points, if I may, Martin. Firstly, is just to thank Congressman Smith and Senator Menendez for their contributions earlier. But it goes much further than that, of course, because Senator Menendez, along with Senator Susan Collins, have introduced a resolution into the Senate on support for the Good Friday Agreement. As Danny O'Connell, AOH President, mentioned earlier, bipartisan support in the Senate. It's a bipartisan resolution that we expect to be voted on maybe next week, but certainly before the 23rd anniversary of the referenda on the Good Friday Agreement. So that's hugely important, a hugely important restatement of that support. And everyone here knows the importance of US political support to not just making the agreement happen, but now sustaining it and making sure that it's implemented fully. And just lastly, and I know you know this, Martin, but the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Simon Coveney, will also be speaking virtually to us in the consulate on Tuesday. As you know, he has a very broad range of issues on his desk at any given moment, but I know that Northern Ireland and Brexit will feature largely, and I expect Ballymurphy to feature also. So thank you for the opportunity to address this morning. Thank you, Martin.
Thank you, Consul General.
I know I'm handing back to Danny O'Connell, AOH President.
Great, yes.
This was worse than...
Danny, you're on mute.
My apologies. Thank you, Consul General Martin, all of our speakers so far. We will have an opportunity shortly for the participants to ask questions of the presenters. The next person we're going to hear from is a new friend of the AOH, Ms. Louise Margaret Haig, Member of Parliament from Sheffield, currently serving as a Shadow Secretary of the State for Northern Ireland. Ms. Haig spoke to us earlier this week about the importance of prosecution in order to have effective investigations, and it really stuck with me. I was able to connect with her staff yesterday. They were able to connect with her overnight. She was kind enough to join us. She has another event. We have her right up against it, so when she's done with her work, she'll move forward. But thank you, Ms. Haig. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Danny, and thank you to the AOH for hosting today. It's such a privilege to be standing alongside the Ballymurphy families. Bríd and I were on the radio earlier together this week, and it's a pleasure to be alongside the Irish government, who I work with very closely on all kinds of issues in relation to Northern Ireland, and particularly on legacy. So I really appreciate the opportunity to speak today on behalf of the British Labour Party, on behalf of the opposition. As you all know, the British Labour Party in 1998 were co-signatories to the Good Friday Agreement, and we take it and its protection and its ultimate implementation very personally. We have a long history of pursuing peace and reconciliation in Northern Ireland based on respect, equality and justice. And as you'll know, it was Tony Blair who ordered the inquiry into Bloody Sunday after decades of campaigning by those brave families, which eventually led to the truth about that day coming out. I have to say, we know we didn't get everything right in the years following the Good Friday Agreement. But then, as now, we're determined as a party to approach the painful legacy of the past in Northern Ireland with honesty and based on core principles, not least that regardless of who was responsible, there must be truth and justice. And without that, reconciliation for Northern Ireland is impossible. And I think once again, listening to the families today, to Bridger, to John and to Carmel, I think that point has been underlined. The denial of truth, as well as the murders in their first incident, set back reconciliation and exacerbated grief. Families prevented from finding comfort by lies told about their loved ones, which have haunted them down the decades, and by the horrific findings about the soldiers' cruelty and refusing to provide medical treatment and their triumphalist attitudes in the aftermath. A fight for the truth hampered through entirely inadequate investigations and wholly unjustifiable obstacles. So who cannot be struck by the dignity and tenacity of these families and many more that are not with us today, who in the face of those obstacles have fought for the truth and finally this week been vindicated. As we've heard time and again today, the forensically delivered conclusions of Justice Keegan were clear and irrefutable. Those who lost their lives were innocent. Their deaths were without justification. They were murdered. That the families had to wait for so long to clear their name is a profound failure of justice, and I believe one that we must learn from in the United Kingdom, because many more families are still too fighting for answers. The ongoing failure to find the truth is an open wound which ties Northern Ireland perpetually to the past. Burying the truth, refusing to prosecute or investigate crimes has not worked, particularly in the 23 years since the signing of the Good Friday Agreement. Yet these inquest findings were announced on Tuesday, on the same day that the British government confirmed they would be proceeding with legislation that will give an effective amnesty to soldiers, following late night briefings on Twitter the previous week, showing an inexcusable disregard and a lack of basic decency towards victims and survivors. We believe in the Labour Party it is essential that the government proceed on the basis of the Stormont House Agreement, an international treaty signed with our co-guarantors to the Good Friday Agreement, the Irish government, and through which they promised to victims to establish a comprehensive system to look at all outstanding legacy cases through effective investigations that are compliant with Article 2 of the Human Rights Act, and to deliver a process that would, wherever possible, deliver truth and justice. As an opposition, I have said repeatedly to my opposite number, the Secretary of State, that we will work with the government in the interests of truth and justice and to help Northern Ireland move forward. But the lessons of the past are clear. Addressing legacy through unilateral imposition of an amnesty from Westminster without the faintest hint of partnership with victims, with political parties in Northern Ireland, or with the Irish government would be foolish and impossible to deliver. It would make reconciliation harder, not easier to achieve, and it would almost certainly be illegal. And so the government must resile from their current position and recommit to the principles of Stormont House and indeed to the principles of the Good Friday Agreement. Let me just finish with a word on the Prime Minister's actions or lack of them over the last few days. As has been said, in the aftermath of the Bloody Sunday inquiry, David Cameron came to the House of Commons, he liaised and met with the families, and he apologised in a statement. He didn't brief out apologies from disputed calls with politicians. He took full and personal responsibility. That this Prime Minister failed to apologise personally to the families is nothing short of a disgrace. That you heard his non-apology on Twitter further compounds the behaviour of the British state. He should have met with you all and should have come in front of the House of Commons this week, and I hope that we can work together to keep the pressure on him to take full responsibility and deliver accountability. Victims like those who lost loved ones at Ballymurphy have been let down for far too long. Let me finish by congratulating the families for their bravery, their tenacity, and finally this week, their vindication. It's an honour to be with you today and to continue the fight for truth and justice. Thank you.
Thank you so much for such incredible words, Louise. I know you have to get off. I want to give the family members, the 3 family members, an opportunity to make a comment to that great statement. If anyone would like to make a comment, Breach, Carmel, John, you'll need to unmute.
Yeah, Louise, I want to thank you very much, because it's good to have someone, you know, we always felt isolated. In 1971, we felt as if no one cared. We actually felt as if we were up against the whole British state, and to have someone that really cares with, you know, a no Labour Party, and that you have always backed, you know, sort of peace in from 1998, you started the peace process. But it's good to know that we have a friend that's sort of singing from the same hymn book as us, you know, that we do need accountability, and we really need some kind of an investigation. You know, a letter just doesn't do it. It doesn't do it.
Can I come in then?
Absolutely.
Mine would be to the person from the Irish government. I wasn't very impressed by the Taoiseach statement last night. I think there was hard to tell between him and Boris. It's like the two of them were eating off the one sheet. At the end of the day, again, they never mentioned murdered. They never mentioned justice. What is it that, are we supposed to go out and look for that now too? At the end of the day, yes, and it's lovely to have the Labour Party here, and they've always been very supportive, as the Irish government have always been supportive. But I just think the statement that was given out last night, I think the Irish government need to be a wee bit more forceful, because we are Irish too. We may live in the north of Ireland, and people might probably think half of us are English and half of us are Irish, but at the end of the day, we are all born here, and we're all entitled to the same justice, whether you're a Catholic or a Protestant. But at the end of the day, we never ask for an apology of any of them, because we feel it's too early to give us an apology, because they have to tell us and me why they shot my mummy in broad daylight on a lovely summer's afternoon when she was trying to help a child, something that a mother would do. So basically, I think their apologies were disgraced. I think they need to get an investigation. The British soldiers were so disrespectful to our courts that it was a disgrace. They refused to come. One actually came in, and he was supposed to come in. The families who was involved in their loved ones killing, he came in wearing a wig and glasses, and the court was held back because he wasn't supposed to come in with that, because he was still trying to hide himself, because he worked in Belfast every now and again. Some of us might have recognised him. That's how pathetic they were. But at the end of the day, we deserve to know why our innocent, poor loved ones that we have had to live with for 50 years, why were they taken out of our lives? These soldiers that they're talking about honesty, they've lived their lives. They've lived a brilliant life because they got big wages. Some days we had nothing to eat, thanks to them. I'm sorry if I'm seeming a wee bit angry, but I just feel people need to take it on board and be serious. If they're going to help us, get us why our loved ones were shot down, murdered, killed, whatever you want to call it, and they were completely innocent. And the world all knows about it now. So come on, let's get something done here.
Thank you, Breach. And Louise, I know you have to leave. We so appreciate you coming on, especially with the short notice. But when we hear from Senator Menendez, Congressman Smith, Ms. Haig, Member of Parliament, it tells you, Breach, that the whole world is watching, and there's going to be a lot of eyes from a lot of directions moving forward. But thank you again, Louise, and we hope to have you back on an AOH Zoom in the future. We're going to move next to Judge McKay and then John Deasy. As you all know, Judge McKay is the immediate past president of the Ancient Order of Hibernians. He's Honorary Consul General of Ireland, located in New Orleans, Louisiana. Judge also had the opportunity to testify on one of Representative Chris Smith's congressional hearings. Judge McKay.
Thank you, Danny. I won't be too long, just a few comments. I know we've heard so much dialogue today and very, very meaningful. I'd like to start off by thanking you, Danny, for setting the Zoom up and allowing the Hibernians in America to touch the families. We all hear about this, we read about it, but very rarely do we get to touch live folks and see it firsthand. I had the opportunity to be in Ireland and to attend one of the hearings in Belfast. And I was first time I was thrown into it. And I tell you that I was impressed with certainly the civility that the families presented. I don't know if I would be as civil had I had experienced the same thing, but their tenacity is incredible, and their perseverance all these years is incredible, that they still stand as one voice. And I'd also like to thank Martin Galvin, their attorney in America, who gave us the insight and the followings to go on. And I thank Martin. If the Hibernians are the voice of the Irish in America, Martin is the legal voice of the families in Northern Ireland and America. So I thank you so much for including, allowing this to happen. And thank you, Martin, for all that you do for the Hibernians, and congratulations to the families. And we're still there. There's a lot to be done now, obviously. And we're looking forward to anything we can do for you all in the future. God bless. Thank you, Danny.
Thank you, Judge. And we're going to come back to Kieran Madden. I just wanted to give him an opportunity to comment following Louise and some of the comments there. Karen, I wasn't sure if you had a comment or a little bit of follow-up to that.
If Breach will forgive me, I don't have a whole lot of follow-up just yet. As I said, I don't have a readout on the discussion last night. There was a brief statement issued, as is normally the way, but in terms of the detailed discussions. But I hope that I've been clear on the government's behalf that the families, the victims and their families, are supposed to be at the heart of any process. And that's what Stormont House is all about, and trying to get proper processes around investigation and as Breed said, all the information around these killings and all killings in Northern Ireland. So,
thank you, Karen. And I know that you have always worked with us. When we have questions, you've always gotten back to us, and we so appreciate you being on today. And I'm sure we will hear more from you moving forward. Our next guest today is John Deasy. John is a former TD in Ireland from Waterford. He's currently an AOH partner in both our U.S. Well, we partnered up on U.S.-Ireland immigration issues, and I can tell you that he's jumped in and helped me on several issues so far, and we're really excited with our relationship. John Deasy.
Yeah, thanks, Danny. Hello, everyone. Danny, thanks for asking me to join in today. Can I first just join in with everyone else and say well done to the families for everything they've achieved to date. Obviously, this isn't the end of the story for the families. I guess I maybe just kind of try to respond to Breach Voil's last few comments, which really struck me. I was a TD for 18 years, but I also worked in the US House and Senate when I worked in Washington. And as Danny said, I now do some immigration issues and other issues with the AOH. And I'm going to pose a question really to the families and to Mr. O'Murray. You don't need to answer it today, but maybe something that you might take from today and think about as the campaign continues over the next few months. We're going to start visiting congressional offices on different issues over the next few months. My guess is that the Ballymurphy inquest findings, they're known to a small number of congressional offices, but they may not be on the radar of many of the offices in Washington. I think you know this, that it's fair to say that for various reasons, the British government are paying closer attention, as the way I'd put it, to the views of members of Congress. than they have for a very long time. The big reason is that there's a necessity to put together a trade deal with the United States. So maybe this is a question for the families and as well as that for Mr. O'Murray. Is there a way we can assist you guys over the next few months while you continue with the campaign? Maybe it's something that you could give us an indication of today. You probably don't have a complete answer to that question, but keep in mind that we will be in those congressional offices when they start opening up over the next couple of months, and we'd like to get involved.
Any of the family members? Go ahead, Patrick, you get unmute.
John, thanks for those comments, and thanks for the offer to assist. I'm sure we can avail of that. And the British government have in the past, as you will know, been very sensitive to the views of the United States. The United States has played a key role in the peace process in 1988. When we had that support, I think it got things done. And we had the US administration and the Irish government involved. We were in a better place. So we would welcome that. We would obviously need to sit down, consult with the families on your offer, but I would be very confident we'll want to talk to you again. And in the coming weeks and months, there may well be a role for the families in terms of briefing Congress members. And I would also put the question to you to tell us how, in your experience, where you're at, how you think you might be able to help us. You might have an insight, a better insight than us in terms of where we could apply pressure, who we would best need to speak to, who would be most influential. But there is a wee bit of urgency in this because the British government at the minute seem intent on this legislation or legislative change in the near future. So there is some urgency in it, and I think we'll need to get our heads together very soon and to apply the pressure before it's too late. As if they implement the legislation, they bring it through the Commons, then we're left with it, and it's something that we're going to have to deal with. So I suppose we can step back and chat over the coming days, and I would like an early meeting with you just on that issue alone, and I would like some feedback from you with your insight and other people who may be on this webinar as to how we can best utilize that, who are the best people to speak to, and hopefully do that very soon, John. So thanks very much for the offer.
Yeah, you're welcome. Danny, can I just make a comment?
Yes, sir.
I take your point that legal vindication after 50 years isn't enough. And I completely agree with that and accept everything that the families have told us today. To answer your question, the names Richie Neal, Dick Durbin, and Joe Biden come to mind immediately. And they're people who've already, without prodding, have indicated and volunteered that they're interested in Irish issues. So we will be talking to those guys on different stuff over the next few months. And yes, we can include this in our discussions, but we would need specifics and we would need to begin that conversation with you as to what the families wanted us to pursue. So yeah, we can have that roundtable discussion through Danny and with everybody on the executive board if you like.
Thank you, John. And so everyone's aware, John also brings, besides his experience as a TD, he served as a special envoy to the U.S. Congress for Ireland for several years prior to his decision not to run again. And one of the things we're working on is bringing a special envoy to Ireland again, to the North of Ireland, to help us out. And we're so happy that several members, a bipartisan group of Congress has sent a letter to the White House echoing how important it is. So they've joined the AOH in pushing for the appointment of the special envoy. We're going to move to Sean Pender, Karen Quinn, Dolores Desch, possibly Karen Keene. I think she just signed back in from the convention she's attended. And then we're going to go to questions. So if you have a question and you weren't on that list, at the bottom of your screen, you could raise your hand electronically. We will bring you in and we will take questions. And from this point forward, I invite all the family members and panelists to make comments as appropriate. If you have a response or a reply, we're going to ask you to jump right in. When we do get to questions, we'd like you to limit it to a question. I know everybody on the call has a statement to make, but we're coming up to a hard stop in about 40 minutes, which is longer than we had planned to go. So we just want to limit it to a question. Sean Pender.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks to all on this call, especially the families and their legal representation. I'm coming at you today from the New Jersey Convention, where later on this evening, we will give out the 6th biannual Mullen Award that we present to a leader of the clergy. In 2011, we named that award after Father Hugh Mullen. I'm also, Carmel, coming out to you from the same stage that you spoke at just a couple of years ago. And the members of our organization share the joy that you all must be experiencing. I first met the families in 2008 in Derry when they were giving a presentation during Bloody Sunday weekend. And I was so moved. I brought that story back, and that was the center point of my presentation in New Orleans in 2008. And I've been proud to stay close with them since then. In 2011, I was proud to work with Congressman Smith's office to bring John Taggart over to testify in DC. In 2013, we had a very, very special Easter Mass in Ballymurphy in the church with our group that was over for Freedom for Ireland. And in 2009, with Judge McKay and others, we were in the court where we saw some of these proceedings. But on Tuesday, I don't know if I was ever overcome with so much emotion when I heard Justice Keegan say that without a doubt, they were all entirely innocent. So I applaud your tenacity. I celebrate justice with you. It's not over yet, as we've talked, but I think it's totally reprehensible and insulting what the Prime Minister of Great Britain sent to you. What they need to realize is not one fact has changed in almost 50 years of what happened. For them, for 50 years to cover this up, purposefully to cover this up, and now you're going to give me a 3-paragraph piece of paper? No, sir, that is not acceptable. And what we as Irish American can do, we should be happy today that we have the Congressman Smith's office, who's had 17 hearings, Senator Menendez, who has the proclamation. All that needs to be done is live up to the Good Friday Agreement and implement the Stormont House. Nothing less for all those victims is what is needed. So thank you very much for your compassion, your friendship, and I'm so happy for all of the families. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Karen Quinn, Sinn Féin representative to the United States.
Johnny and everybody on the call, it's great to be invited on, and it's always a privilege to listen to the families of Ballymurphy. Not just the detailed experiences, but also the hope they bring to any struggle, having faced 50 years of this to get to this point. And I think just that we face it, and the issue of Ballymurphy is not an issue about the past. It's an issue it's just as much about the present and the future. It's about the type of Ireland we want to build. It's about respect, and it's about getting to truth and justice. And I think there's very considerable challenges, both to not only Stormont House, but the Good Friday Agreement at present in the North, where it's from unionism or where it's from the actions of the British government. And I think in terms of Irish America and America, there's much more that can be done in terms of bringing the British government back to what they agreed at Stormont House and back to what they agreed at Good Friday. And we shouldn't blind ourselves by what's going on with the British government. Despite all of the spin that they've put into it, they were very explicit on Tuesday when Boris Johnson led forward a briefing on what was in the Queen's speech. And he says it was about helping victims and ending the cycle of investigations. The British government's approach is not about truth. It's not even about the issue of persecutions, and it's definitely not about justice. It is about ending investigations. And the corollary of that is that the British government, as people have said this, know what happened. They're sitting on the files. This week was the 40th anniversary of the killing of Julie Livingstone, who was 14. She was killed by a plastic bullet. The files relating to Julie Livingstone were sealed by the British government a couple of years ago, and they're not going to be made public until 2064. That's not even about an investigation. They know those files are sitting there. They are being kept secret. So the families of Ballymurphy shows what can be achieved about the legal routes, about holding the British government to account. And I think that there's something there to be picked up and learned. And that's the reason why the British government now want to overturn Stormont House. They want to end investigations. Because the truth, they have the truth there. End the investigations, and you've no way of ever getting that out into the open. So I think strategically is a very important point for us in Ireland and also for America to come at this. And I do think the Irish government have a role to play in it. This is one issue that unites the Irish government, Sinn Féin, all of the parties in the north, the SDLP, the Alliance Party, even the Catholic bishops come out and put a statement out. All of the groups, all of the parties in the Dáil support the right to truth and justice, and even the unionists oppose the concept of an amnesty. So I think that there's a huge opportunity there, and part of it must be about getting America into play. We have some very good friends in Congress. Senator Menendez's resolution is very, very explicit in terms of Stormont House, and that has to be welcomed. The House has also put forward similar statements, and I think, Danny, the piece that you raised is we also need to get the administration engaged. And that is an envoy coming to safeguard the Good Friday Agreement and Stormont House. Bringing an envoy into play will bring the British government's attention back to this and show that this isn't about Ballymurphy, it's not even about Belfast or the North. This is about an international campaign to support agreements and truth and justice. So again, thank you for allowing us to speak today. And again, it's always a privilege to hear and meet with the families.
Thank you for joining us, Karen, and we appreciate working together. And one of the things we talked about earlier is a nonpartisan organization. We work with all groups on all issues that we're like-minded, and we've worked closely with Karen on the justice issues, as well as a United Ireland, as well as Brexit. And it's been an honor to work with you. We are going to hear from Audrey Murphy and Mark Thompson, either or. I know you're both on. If one of you want to jump on following our LAOH leadership, just free from the New Jersey State Convention, LAOH National President Karen King.
Thank you very much, Danny. I want everyone who's listening to know that the LAOH stands very firm with our brothers in the AOH. We are prepared to go to Washington with the representatives from the Ballymurphy families and anyone else regarding making sure a U.S. envoy gets appointed to the North, and to make sure that the agreements that were entered into that was supposed to stop and handle these things are fully executed and carried out. When we don't do that, what's the point of these agreements? We lose credibility. No one has any trust in government. And we have to, as Irish America, help and stand up for that. The LAOH is across the country, California to New York to Maryland to Texas to Montana. Women are strong, and we have to step up and answer that call. We have to protect the other women, mothers, daughters, granddaughters, wives of the people in the North that need answers, and they need that agreement that was entered into and helped by America to find the solution and the resolution and the justice for everyone. I ask everyone, especially on the lady side, reflect if this was your family. It's very easy for us to say it's another country, the country that we all came from. And I want you to say, how would you feel if that was your family? What action would you expect us to take to support you and to support your family? And that is the action that we have to take, because this is our sisters and our cousins. We have to step up our game, and we have to join in this fight, because every other agreement will go down. People will have no faith in government. And that's what I ask. I ask all of our members to feel the passion that Dolores is so much more eloquently able to articulate than I am. And I will turn it over, Danny, with your permission, to my Freedom for All Ireland chair, Dolores Desch. So much more knowledgeable and understanding. Thank you.
Thank you. And right to Dolores, who I know we can't say enough about. She's worked so well with our chairman, and it's great to have a united team, a united front. Dolores?
Oh, thank you, Danny. Wow, that was great praise. But today's the day for the Ballymurphy families. And I just want to thank all of you for the work that you've done. And as Danny said, you know, watching that video in the beginning of this broadcast, we all, you know, welled up. And we would have had we not met you, but we met you when you came to America. We got to know who you were. We met Carmel. We met other members. We went over there back in 2019 and we sat in the courtroom. Breege, I met your sister in the courtroom, and we talked afterwards. I've met you and John and Carmel again, and the strength of these families is just phenomenal. I think the fact that you've brought your story out so many times, it must be very painful. However, we've told that story in our meetings and at our conventions as Hibernians. We continue to keep the Ballymurphy families in the forefront of our discussions for Freedom for All Ireland. So when this week came, and last week, and we were waiting patiently but excitedly for this result, we were a bit fearful that we would have gotten something that was less than what it was. So while we had felt your pain and your anguish, we also felt your enthusiasm and your elation when this verdict was read out and when it came to us. So I just want to say thank you for all the work you do, and to your legal team. I know Padre Omar is on, who works really closely with all the families. And I also want to say that I think you've inspired the other families that are over there trying to fight. The Spring Hill massacre was one where another priest was murdered, very close to Ballymurphy, if not in Ballymurphy, within a year, I think, of the Ballymurphy murders. And so I think, there were 3 children killed in that massacre, and that's just another one that's out there of the many, many victims. So I just want to say thank you for the work that you've done. Thank you, Danny. You have representatives from 3 governments on this call. I think that's incredible. And thank you to everyone who's on today.
Thank you, Dolores and Karen. Again, keep up the great work. I think one of the unfortunate realities here is that had the British government simply addressed this disaster 50 years ago, and as Dolores alluded to, there would not have been a Bloody Sunday. There should not have been anything beyond this. They should have stepped in immediately, and although it should have never happened, had they addressed this the very first day, maybe we don't have 10 victims of this massacre. We're going to move to Audrey Murphy and Mark Thompson. If you want to unmute and start your video, then we're going to take the few questions that we have hands raised. We ask them to please limit the questions because we want to circle back to Martin and the family members for closing comments, and we have a hard stop in 25 minutes. Who's on there? Mark? How are you, Mark?
It's Mark.
Mark, I think you might have a slow internet issue. Let's try one more time.
First of all, thank you. It's been, as Dolores and Karen has said, powerful, and the represent. Okay. Is it better? Can you hear me without video?
Yes, it's better without video.
Can you hear me?
That's not a personal comment.
Okay. Well, listen, no, first of all, let me pay tribute to the families and the presentations. And I think probably the summations probably from Kieran as well, Kieran Quinn, and from Patrick Murray, the solicitor, regarding the British government, the amnesty and what they're trying to push forward. I just think it's reprehensible. In many respects, just a sense of the current situation here. There are roughly 900 to 1,000 civil cases regarding a conflict in which the state colluded in murders or directly involved in murders. And that's in the High Court. The police ombudsman is dealing with around 330 cases where misfeasance in public office, wrongdoing and collusion has been evidenced, met their threshold and warrant investigation. And then we have the inquest waiting, which Patrick will be aware of and is involved in many of those too. And what is happening then, we have processes that can deliver like the Ombudsman or like the inquest court or through even civil litigation. What we see is we see a pulling of the plug of resources. Patrick referred to it when Arlene Foster had to be taken to court by families for refusing to fund the Lord Chief Justice's plan to go forward. The Department of Justice and the NIO have previously pulled the plug on the Police Ombudsman's Office. There's been an assault on victims in the courts, and it's being led by the PSNI, the MOD, and the British government to stop truth from coming out. They've resorted to the use of public interest immunity certificates, secret courts, closed material procedures, and even in those instances where policemen and soldiers are willing to come forward and to provide evidence, they went and arrested them and threatened to charge them with breaching the Official Secrets Act. And why am I saying all of this? For 20 years, families have fought and fought and fought and faced every obstacle from the British state. And to somehow be told that if they remove the threat of prosecution, people will come forward and tell the truth, it's the biggest con. And if anyone believes that, they're living in a fantasy land. The only thing that's going to work is going to be the implementation of the major compromise that was made, to which 3,500 relatives signed a letter, an open letter, stating that compromise, which was the which was the Stormont House Agreement, which stems from the Good Friday Agreement. It's an international agreement. It's human rights compliant. It provides a menu of options for everyone, and it's the only way forward. And we need US support to hold the British government to account. US support, US involvement is vital in achieving this. And I know, Danny, that you and I and Sean and some AOH people and others have been talking recently about strategizing and going forward. We did a conversation last week about that, and it's important that we continue that conversation, we strategize, and we use the US influence to ensure that the rights, entitlements, and human rights of families are upheld, and that they have the investigations and the accountability that could be provided for within the Stormont House Agreement. I want to again pay tribute to everybody today in this webinar, and particularly yourself, Danny, and the AOH, and the opportunity just to say that US support is vital. Thanking you.
Thank you, Mark. Our loved Andrea, and all the panelists did just a wonderful job. We're going to move to 3 final questions, and we've elevated a few people into the panelists. Following those questions, we're going to go back to Martin and our guest from Ballymurphy for concluding comments. Before I go to the first question, which will be Eamon Daly, I just want to recognize Rich Lawler from Irish Northern Aid, who joined us today. Damo O'Cathing, I think I pronounced your name wrong, Damo, I apologize. And he's the president of the Brahons from New York County in New York. And Peter Kissel, the president of the Irish American Unity Conference, who will have a question with us shortly. Eamon, welcome. Your question?
Thank you, Danny. Well, it's not really a question, it's a statement. The question I would have is, why hasn't the British government gave a proper apology? I'm living over here in Northern Ireland, and as Breege and Louise said very, very well, that it is totally disgraceful that Boris Johnson has not come out and publicly apologized for 10 people killed, cold blood murder, and they just want to brush it away. And also, Danny, I want to thank you for putting on this great presentation. Really, really enjoyed it. And you have other people on there, and I don't want to take up too much of your time. But I'm watching the news every night, 3 times a day. Not once has there been any sort of proper apology. They just want to brush it under the carpet and forget about it. So by you doing this here, this will bring it more to their attention. And those politicians, knowing they have our support, hopefully will help the British government to stand up like real people and give a proper apology for cold-blooded murder 50 years ago. And I'll leave it at that, Danny.
Thank you, Eamon. Eamon's a member from Philadelphia, and Eamon, you got to dig down into some of that Philadelphia politics and get your letters written off as a resident of Drumnaquilly, and let them know that you're a citizen and you expect action immediately. Tim Miles. Timmy,
Thank you, Danny.
Unmute, please, Tim.
Mute.
Go ahead, Tim. You're unmuted.
Okay, thank you, Danny and National Board for hosting. This is very important. And I want to congratulate the families, John, Breach, Carmel, and the rest. I've been around with this campaign for a long time, and I've always had the badges. And I've had the two of them on today. I have one that John Dougherty gave me personally. But watching the very moving video today, I saw those T-shirts, innocent. I said, we're going to have to get those out here in the States and get people to sell them and raise money and awareness for this campaign as we go forward. We got the truth. Now we need the justice. So perhaps working forward, we can find a way to get those shirts out here. Thank you. And congratulations to the families again.
Thank you, Tim. Peter Kissel, president of the Irish American Unity Conference, for our last question.
Yeah, thank you, Danny. And first, I do want to thank the AOH and in particular Danny and Martin for hosting this webinar, which is just such a wonderful opportunity to hear from so many folks. And I do want to say to John and Breege and Carmel, as well as of course Janet and Alice and all of the families, how very proud we all are of you here. And in particular, how much of an inspiration you have been to all the rest of us, as Martin and others have said here today. It really, you've inspired us, believe me, more than we could possibly ever, and help you pay back and help you. So congratulations. I have a question on the forthcoming legislation from the British government. Fintan O'Toole has a column in today's Irish Times, which, try not to laugh, is titled "Troubles Victims Deserve the Truth. There will be no more prosecutions." Regardless of what you think about that, he says in this article, let's see if the draft legislation, when it emerges, can finally create a system that places the needs of victims and their families at its center. My question is, do you have any faith whatsoever that the British legislation is going to put you and the other families at its center?
Go ahead, Patrick. You unmute. Any of the family members unmute? Patrick, go ahead.
Peter, good question. An easy answer: no faith. Without an investigative arm, you can't get truth. Ballymurphy's the perfect example. It took a legal process. It took obligations on the Ministry of Defence from a judge to hand over documentation, to bring witnesses to court, to examine those witnesses. So without that process, it wouldn't have happened. We wouldn't have had the counter narrative, the evidential base on which the judge made her decisions. If we relied solely on people coming forward to give information, then it wouldn't have happened. And we would have had no basis without evidence to get that legal vindication. Our loved ones knew they were innocent. The families today didn't learn anything new in terms of that, but the legal vindication required a legal process and required someone to adjudicate on that and deliver an evidence-based finding. Will that happen with the new proposals, which appears to take away that investigative arm and rip up the Stormont House Agreement? That'll be a bad day for families, and those investigations that are required are the only way that we can lead to truth, not through a voluntary arrangement where in good faith. It won't happen.
Thank you, Peter. I just want to comment, and I to be honest, I wanted to say it right when he finished, but Relatives for Justice has been such a great partner with the Ancient Order Hibernians. as long as I could remember, on the justice issue. And it's really helped us become more educated on what is going on. And I think the Ballymurphy families, as so many people have said, need to be commended for your willingness to come out publicly, discuss professionally, and really persevere between a delay. I'm going to turn this back to Martin and the families for closing comments, and then we will conclude our event. Go ahead, Martin.
First of all, again, I want to just repeat how much all of the families in Ballymurphy have inspired us, inspired people around the north of Ireland. I know you're on the late show last night, and letting people know throughout Ireland about what is going on in the north and how much that an inspiration that is. As Shanny just said, I actually first met Mark in just involving an investigation of a very close friend of mine, Liam Ryan. I believed for a long time, the family believed there was no hope for anyone who was a victim of a collusion killing. Relatives for Justice showed us how, just as they've shown the AOH, shown everyone that you can fight back, can use the justice system if we can get investigations, if we can force the British to tell the truth, because they're not going to tell it otherwise. And it's just important for us right now, in the name of all of those other families around the north of Ireland, in the name of really showing the reality of what the real conflict in Ireland and what British rule was all about, to shine a light, to put American pressure, not to allow the British government to show if they try and change the law, they try and give an amnesty, if they try and take investigations out of Stormont House and pretend that some other nonsense is going to give the truth, that we show that that's not going to work. Just the way the Ballymurphy family showed never was going to work to brand their loved ones as murderers or people who are guilty, as people who are anything other than totally innocent people. And that's what I'm calling on Irish Northern Aid and the Brehons and Unity Conference, the AOH. We've got to do that work together. We've got to work with the Irish government, push them, but we've got to work to see that Stormont House agreement, the British don't get to do what they want to do, cut off the investigations, cut off any chance for the truth for so many victims in the north of Ireland.
Can I come in, please?
Absolutely.
I would like to say a big, massive thank you to Patrick because with his actions, because we were actually told for years not to go down that route, that it wasn't ever going to happen. But Paddy led us in a very dignified way and brought us to where we are. And also John Taggart. John's very shy, but see, at the same time, see, without John Taggart and Paddy, we wouldn't be sitting here today. And I just want to publicly say thank you to the two of you. We all deserve what we got, but it was thanks to Paddy Murray's good thinking and pushing for us to go for an inquest that got us to where we are today.
All right, I just want to come in and say a big, big, massive thank you to the AOH for your continued support. Britain do set up and listen whenever America get involved in anything. And going forward, the truth, we have the truth now. Now we need justice, and we just need you to push that extra mile for us, get behind us one more time. And for every victim of state violence, for every victim, no matter what background they come from, if they want truth and they want justice, they should be entitled to it. Get amnesty off the table. Put pressure on the British state one more time. But a big, big, massive thank you to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carmel. Patrick?
We have a saying in Gaelic, or skach a Kayla a warren the Dini, and the shelter of others people survive. So my last comments would be to thank Irish America for all the support. You done it in the dark days and difficult days, not only in the good days or what we've seen this week. And you have a bigger role on the way forward. So I look forward to meeting again. I look forward to strategizing with you in terms of how we can bring or use the United States to bring pressure on the British government in the days and weeks ahead. So thanks again.
Thank you, Patrick. And John, I know you had a little bit of a delay with your internet. If you have a closing comment.
Can I just think?
Go ahead, John.
Well, I just want to thank all our American friends and everybody on the panel and those who are watching and all that been on our journey with us. It's been fantastic. It's been roller coaster, but the focus needs to go back on where the problem is. The problems with the British state that have done everything to try and stop us. The only way that we got where we are today is through the legal system, which they tried to block also. And I would hope that for those who come behind us, this is for them too. But what we've done and achieved up to now, we will continue to fight with these proposals for an amnesty for the British soldiers. That's our next fight, and the gloves are off. We're ready for that one too, But closing, I want to thank you all, and thank you for the invite to come and speak here today.
Thank you very much. And I think I want to echo what John said about friends. Right now, I think the emotion that we all saw when we saw that video produced by Belfast Media really, and I just got a chill just thinking about the video, really showed that we have friends in Ireland. We have friends in Belfast. Our friends from Ireland, we have new friends today from the United Kingdom, all working on a common goal. And I think when we have an event like this, and one of the things that Zoom has brought to us is the ability to see our friends and to look at Carmel and look at Breach and hear the passion that all of you speak with. I think it really tells our membership, the largest Irish organization outside of Ireland, how important this is and how important it is to you, the family members of the victims. And I just want to thank you. I want to thank Chris Cook, who's our IT guy. Without him, we would not be on here. He is also, Chris, any comments as we're closing? Tim Noonan's also on with us, our other IT guy. Go ahead, Chris, and Chris's mom joined us today. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I just want to congratulate the families. It's a long time coming, and just echo, I think that video at the beginning really helps explain, why justice matters even 50 years later. People question why look back that far for legacy issues, and I think that video shows you why.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Tim, for your help. And Chris, if you want to go to our closing video. Thank you all. God bless. We're here for you. Go ahead, Tim.
Thank you.
Thank you.